Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times, and I would like to welcome you to today's program, Increase Your Dev Efficiency with Application Error Monitoring. Before we get started, I have a couple of brief housekeeping announcements. First, today's session will be followed by a live Q&A. At any time during the presentation, you can type in a question in the questions panel in the control panel. Hit submit, and we'll get to as many as time allows at the end. And secondly, today's presentation will be available on demand on the sdtimes.com website in about 24 hours or so. And so it'll be there for you to replay to your heart's content. Okay, on to today's program. So we all know writing great code is difficult. And even with careful planning and process, unexpected issues arise that can distract you from delivering a useful, manageable service. Application error monitoring helps cut through the noise and minimize the time spent chasing and resolving bugs. Real-time alerts warn you about critical problems affecting your users and give you the information you need to quickly prioritize and understand the problem. So here to dive into that topic in more depth is Joe Godfrey. He's the CEO and head of product at a company called Airbreak.io. He spent the last 20 years building products and services for Microsoft, Amazon, and a handful of startups. And now, without further ado, Joe, take it away.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you having us here and hosting us for this. And I appreciate everyone. And I appreciate everyone who's attending. Hopefully, you're here to learn how you can write better code faster with less of the stuff that is most frustrating. So as David said, I'm the CEO of Airbreak.io, and application error monitoring is the core of what we do. My background started out in quality assurance, so monitoring for errors and finding bugs and fixing bugs quickly is core to kind of me and my profession and what I've done, and it's fed into everything I've done since then as far as the way we've built software and delivered products and services to customers. So let's just jump in. So look, I'll talk a little bit first about the user is king. I think everyone on this webinar knows that. You wouldn't be here if you weren't worried about the user. And chances are your company invests very heavily in user happiness. But chances are that also, at least in part, fails to live up to what you're trying to accomplish. That failure matters, of course, because if you fail your users, your business is going to have a tough time succeeding. But error monitoring is another tool that some folks aren't using that can really help drive success in the area of user happiness. And then, as mentioned before, we'll have a Q&A at the end. I'll also say this presentation, all these slides and everything will be available. We'll go ahead and send that out after the presentation, so you don't have to spend a bunch of time furiously taking notes or snapping screenshots or whatever. We'll send this all to you. So, like the users came. So regardless of what kind of business you're in, whether you're selling things directly to your users and they're buying your stuff, or you're serving ads to them that they click, or it's just about getting them to consume your content, in all of those cases, their experience matters to you tremendously. One, for the direct financial impact, but two, they're the ones who are going to tell everyone how great your product is or how terrible your product is. So at the end of the day, if your users aren't happy, your business is going to be in a bad place, if not now, probably in the near future. And if they are happy, that's oftentimes the key to success in both delivering a great service and being able to monetize it, but in also kind of building that viral loop of satisfaction where they're telling other people how great your product is and they're signing up as well. So, because of this, companies obviously invest heavily in user happiness. Obviously, you want to develop a delightful and intuitive user experience, which some people kind of refer to as UX more broadly, and it shows your users that you value their time and gives them joy in using the service. You have to ensure, of course, your service provides some type of real value, helping users solve some kind of clear and pressing problem. Even if that problem is how to kill 3 minutes in line, browsing an application, that's still solving a problem. Companies have started investing more and more heavily over the last half a dozen years or so in application performance monitoring. Because at the end of the day, you could build the world's greatest app, but if it doesn't load or it takes too long to load, no one's going to see it and it's going to be irrelevant. And of course, on top of all of this, having great customer service, being responsive to your customers well. These are all things, when you think about the amount of money that's spent doing these things, In many cases, it could be more than even the amount of money spent on just building the core of the service or the product, writing the code. And all of this is critical for sure. It's hard to deliver a great user experience without this stuff. But if you have a problem that's fatal, your performance monitoring is likely to notice. But is it going to tell you how to fix that problem? Is it just going to tell you, hey, your service is down? And if the problem happens along your intended user path, you have automated tests that'll probably catch it. But what about edge cases or core cases you forgot to write automated tests for, or the tests that your tests are out of date, and so you've turned off certain parts of the test because they keep bringing back false positives, so you're not actually monitoring all the things you're supposed to be monitoring. If a problem is directly affecting your sales, like the buy button is completely missing for every customer, your metrics are probably going to let you know that. But even in this case, so now you know your sales are off. Are you going to know this because the buy button's there? Or are you just going to know there's some problem it's not allowing people to buy? And how do you even know to where to start to look for the source of that problem? And then, in addition to all of this, if you've built some customer loyalty, you'll have some users who will write into you who will say, hey, I'm having this problem. And that's great. But how many other customers just got frustrated and left, or potential customers you haven't built that loyalty, who just said, I really wanted to buy something, I really wanted to consume this content, I really want to use the service, but it's not working, so I'm out of here, I'm going to go to a competitor. So if you've done all these things we talked about here, you might be okay, but more likely, you're going to end up with some frustrated users. Not all the time, not in every release, but certainly you're going to release bugs and problems that frustrate your users, and you're not going to be able to fix that problem as quickly as you would like, which is both bad for your users and it's bad for you, because you're going to run around scrambling, in the middle of a fire drill trying to figure out the best way to figure out what's going on and to get it fixed. So errors are bad. That's pretty clear. They impact your application quality. They impact your customer experience. Then that still leaves the question, so today, how are we monitoring for bugs and errors? What are the processes people use today or tend to use today? For me, again, this goes back to my start in QA at Amazon in the 90s and the first half of the 2000s. I spent a lot of time grepping through logs. We'd do releases. I'd have 8 terminal windows up, kind of errors flying through them, me filtering to remove certain things or highlight certain things, and just looking for anything that looked out of place through the millions and millions of errors, looking for that one that was new and interesting and different that I hadn't seen 1,000 times before. We had automated tests. We spent a whole lot of time updating those tests. We spent a whole lot of time dealing with false positives. We'd run our automated tests and we'd get 6 problems. And we'd say, oh yeah, there were 6 problems last time, so I think we're good. They look like the same problems as the last time we ran this week. Those tests are just out of date. I don't have time to fix them. Obviously, you're spending time watching your KPIs, your sales metrics. You see a 10% drop in sales and you say, is that a bug? Is that, something about the new feature we launched that's going to catch up later? Or worse, you see no drop in sales, and it turns out that really great thing you launched actually had a 20% bump, but then you had some other error that had a 20% fall, and you're never going to know that because everything looks like it's just kind of the same. Certainly in Amazon, when I was there, we used our customers as testers all the time. Anyone who used Amazon in the kind of early 2000s probably remembers that anytime we would launch something new, the site kind of half fell apart. Then we'd scramble to get it fixed. We worked until 2, 3, 4 in the morning to roll out the critical fixes and maybe got around to the other ones later. And you guys are probably doing lots and lots of manual testing in addition to all of this. Whether that manual testing is proactive of releasing something and running a bunch of tests to try to identify it as quickly as possible, or reactive of there's something wrong and now you're running through a bunch of tests trying to figure out how to reproduce the problem and what's going on. This is kind of the way it tends to be done a lot. You might be better than some. You might have a little bit better automated tests that catch more stuff. You might have great customers who are really on top of letting you know when there's a problem. But hopefully, when you look at this list, some of the things here resonate with you. We've done some surveys with customers, and one we did said, and this is someone who worked in, or these are companies that generally work in like an Agile model, a little bit of waterfall, a little bit continuous deployment, but that when they have what they would term as a good deployment, on average, they were spending 7 hours of time just trying to put out fires, just trying to do some of the things we were talking about manual testing and trying to recreate problems and track down issues and figure out why the metrics went sideways. And that's a good deployment. When the deployments went badly, that estimate tended to more than double. So it's clearly an issue where people are spending much too much time trying to fix problems that come from these software releases, which are designed to improve the service, but at least sometimes can temporarily make your service worse. So look, there's a better approach. And again, part of this goes back to my experience of having worked in QA for several years, working in product management, and developing tools and services, quite frankly, almost all of which are things we get people to pay for. My experience in that has led us to trying to build something that makes this process better so we can launch more features more quickly and with less pain for us and for the users. So application error monitoring is really about helping you identify any unique problems that happen in real time and giving you the information you need to prioritize and fix those critical issues as quickly as possible. At its simplest, that's what we do, is when something goes wrong, we tell you about it and we help you get it fixed quickly. Just showing you, of course, I'm going to promote Airbrake as the CEO of Airbrake, but here's some examples of some of the things that error monitoring in general does, and specifically how Airbrake does it. So first of all, identify and prioritize. So anytime an error happens, getting ahead of that, I guess, we monitor deployment. So anytime you do a deployment and introduce errors, we'll let you know, hey, this deployment resolved some errors, it introduced some new errors, it might have reintroduced a problem that had happened before. So you can look, and if you're doing, say, continuous deployment, you might have 12, 15 releases in a day. All of a sudden, a customer calls in to say something terrible is happening, and you're like, shit, did that happen in the release we did 10 minutes ago, or the release an hour ago, or the release this morning? Being able to pinpoint that back to a specific release lets you know, okay, it was the last one, we just need to roll back the last one, versus no, that happened this morning. We need to go in and either revert that one change if it's isolated, or go in and make a fix to that. Let's not worry about the last 6 releases we did, because those actually weren't the source of the problem. In addition to that, just getting those instant alerts when those new errors occur, so you don't have to wait for the customer to write in. Ideally, you get those through Slack or HipChat, but we send email to people that prefer to get it through email. But some kind of notification of, hey, you've got 1 million errors in your logs, but this one is new. We haven't seen this before. You need to be aware of this, and it just got introduced. In addition, grouping those errors into a manageable number of unique problems. If you're like any company I've worked for, our error logs had millions and millions of errors, but there might have only been like 10 unique problems in that set, or 15 unique problems in that set. Trying to go through the logs and figure out if those million errors, which ones matter, is hard. It's a whole lot easier if you've got someone that says, you've got 10 unique problems, here's the details, here's the history of when that first occurred, when it last occurred, which users are being affected, et cetera, so that you can say, okay, I'm going to tackle this one first. I'm going to tackle this one second. And it becomes a much more manageable problem to solve than just, I've got millions of errors in my logs and I can't even look at it. And then, of course, what's critical to you may depend on your situation. So being able to prioritize errors based on, again, when they occurred, how severe they are, something called error weight, which is our kind of proprietary algorithm for helping you determine which errors you should attack first. This is all just about, hey, there's a problem, and I want to figure out, do I care about this problem, and is it critical, or is it something I fix later, and when and how did it happen? From there, it's all about reacting and getting that problem resolved as quickly as possible. So, one of the great things about Airbrake is not only do we tell you that there's a new error, but we collect all sorts of data that in many cases isn't available in your error log. We have the breadcrumb, we have what are called code hunks, which is just like a really quick view into, we tell you, hey, it happened on this line of this file. We also give you a preview into that of like, here's the couple lines before that and a couple lines after that, so you can get a really quick sense of maybe what the problem might be from that. Things like aggregations that tell you, here's the users who were affected. Here was the browsers those users were using. Here's the IPs they were coming from. Here's the regions they were from, or the hosts, the servers they were on. Anything that lets you really zero in on, what is the core of this problem, right? That I'm sure we've all had a situation where, sales are off by 10% and you can't figure out why. And then after hours and hours of searching, you figured out that there's a version of Safari that had a weird glitch and the buy button isn't showing up for that version of Safari. And your QA team and your engineers have been trying to reproduce this error forever. They've tried every browser, but they're on a different version of Safari, right? So they're not actually finding this core problem. By the time you find it, how much time has been wasted, how much frustration has occurred, how many users haven't been able to buy something. Things like aggregations can tell you, hey, this is a Chrome problem in this version of Chrome, or it's a Chrome problem across all versions, or it's a single user who's hitting your API over and over and over again in this weird way versus it's everyone trying to use your API. And then stepping back from all of that, just being able to monitor your critical trends and analytics. A great example is I've worked in places where we've said we really need to do a bug squash sprint every second sprint or every third sprint, right? Okay, so you do that for 2, 3, 4 months. Have the number of errors gone down? Have they not moved at all? Like, has that been a good investment? Not a good investment? Being able to see those trends over time to say, hey, we invested in squashing bugs and it's working. Or we haven't invested in squashing bugs, but we need to because look at our error rates are going up and to the right all the time. So this is really just about giving you that full suite of tools you need to say, anytime there's a problem, tell me about it. Tell me who it's affecting, how it's affecting them. Give me all the tools I need to figure out where in my code it's coming from, what deploy caused it, and then how I can actually go in and fix that problem. And then give me the tools I need to show my manager, like, hey, the things we're doing are working, things are getting better, or hey, things are getting worse, I need more resources. Because what we have now doesn't allow us to fix the problems that we have, and being able to prove that. So look, this is, when you think about software releases, kind of, at least this has been my experience, your typical release is you release software and you kind of immediately start praying. And then once you've taken a second to start praying, you start scouring for problems. You're diving into the logs, you're monitoring support queues, you're frantically regression testing. And as you find problems, you're kind of guessing the scope. Is this affecting all users, some users? Is it gonna hit the metrics or not? And then you're scrambling to find and fix these bugs, really without the context or additional information that helps you prioritize and get them fixed quickly. Error monitoring really turns that on its head. So you relax, you release your software and you relax. Like maybe you grab a cup of coffee and you sit there and you get real-time alerts. So if there's a new error, you get alerted to it in Slack or an email, whatever it might be. And with each new error, you can really quickly assess the scope. Who is this affecting? How is it affecting them? Which URLs is it occurring? And you can fix those bugs quickly and confidently because now you know the scope. You know the source, you've got all the additional information. You know that when you fix that problem, you've actually fixed it for the suite of users that you're targeting, not just for the use case that you were able to reproduce it on, but any set of use cases. And then you can repeat, you can release again. If you're doing waterfall releases once every 2, 3, 4 months, you probably spend days and days and days dealing with post-launch issues. And this allows you to spend, hours or maybe minutes if you really nail it. If you're doing continuous deployment, you might not be spending any direct plan time post-release, but I guarantee you're spending time when issues pop up, and in many cases, you're just missing issues that are happening and finding out about them later, either because the metrics are off, because someone's complained, and this allows you to say, okay, I'm gonna spend a minute, or maybe I'm not, I'm just gonna wait, and if an alert comes in, I'm gonna spend a minute fixing it now instead of spending an hour fixing it later. So regardless of how frequently you're releasing or what sort of release style you have, error monitoring is basically a tool that's going to let you do it a lot more efficiently with a lot less pain for your users. And look, that's basically the presentation. I'll just say at the end, kind of my shameless plug is the proof is in the pudding. So this is just a couple of quotes from people that longtime Airbrake users who found it to be a critical part of their workflow. And it's one of those tools that I have engineers any engineers we have who use it say they can't live without it, and I talk to engineers all the time who've never heard of it, but then their immediate reaction tends to be, oh man, I really need something like that. So I would just say, it's really simple to set up and get going. It just takes a couple minutes, and if you want to give it a try and reach out to me, I'm happy to give you guys a discount for a couple months if it eases your onboarding process for your team, because I'm pretty confident that once you guys try it, you'll realize that this is going to make your life a whole lot easier. And again, it's going to really improve the experience for your users, which is going to be good for your business, whatever it is that you're doing. So Dave, that's kind of it. I don't know, Q&A is what's left. I think some questions have come in, but I've been so focused on the presentation that I haven't seen them. So
yeah, so
sure.
We have a question from Anders here.
Yep. What
do you use to collect logs?
Oh, what do you use to collect logs? That's a great question. So I didn't cover that really at all. So what air brake service is, we basically have what are called notifiers, which in the case of Rails is a gem, but for whatever languages, it would be some kind of a library, very lightweight library that you install in your app. And what it does is it listens silently in the background, runs asynchronous to whatever your app is doing. So in no way does it create a dependency in your app that could cause issues. But it basically listens for problems, and if there's a caught or uncaught exception, it shoots that over to us, to the air brake service via the API, and we collect those and aggregate them. So that's how we're able to say, oh, this is a new problem or it's an existing problem, because every error that happens gets sent over to us. And we basically have a parsing mechanism and a deduping mechanism where we say, this is the same problem that's happened before, and we're going to make a note of it and a record of it and add it to our aggregations, or this is a new problem and I'm going to alert the user and let them know. So it is something that sits, it's separate from your logs. It has information that won't be in your logs, but it also won't have all of the information that would be in your logs, I guess would be it's a complement to your logs that is a simpler tool to kind of get that first level view of what new problems do I have and what's the critical information I need to fix it, as opposed to logs, which are kind of a broader, everything is in there and it's, you know, lightly organized, and it kind of requires you to dive in deep to figure out what are the unique problems. Is that helpful? I hope. I guess the visitors are on silence. So.
Yeah. Great. We have another question from Kimbre. Where do you pull the raw data from? App libraries, logs?
Yes, I think this is kind of the same version, or a different version of the same question. But again, it's a simple library you install in your app. We actually support all major programming languages and frameworks. In many cases, it's a notifier that we created. In some cases, it's something where the community has created it, where someone, we didn't have an official notifier for a framework and they said they were going to build one. All the notifiers are 100% open source in GitHub, which is why people are able to build their own notifiers as well as submit pull requests against our existing notifiers. So the good news there is it's basically the notifiers we end up being a collection of the various features and functionality that the community cares most about, because they can submit PRs and make changes to the notifiers and build their own. So it's basically a very lightweight library that you stick in your app that then collects that data in real time and sends it over to us. So it does not, to answer more pointedly, you do not give us access to your logs or any other systems. It's just an app that shoots the information to us one way without us having any ability to pry into anything going on in your world. Great. Are there other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions here, Joe. And one of them is, so how is all of this useful for continuous deployments?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I touched on that a little bit earlier, but basically, you know, the use cases are a bit different for continuous deployment versus Agile or waterfall, but the value in my mind works out the same. So for continuous deployment, the use case I think I went through earlier was you might deploy 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 times in a day. But if you don't have real-time alerts and you don't have something tracking back the first occurrence of those errors back to which deployment caused it, then you're really left guessing. And you end up having a problem where a customer calls in and or one of your QA engineers or somebody finds a problem at 4 p.m. You effectively have no idea which deployment or which change caused that problem. You might be able to guess depending on the URL or the feature, you know, based on what's been released, but you're kind of in this stuck position where you say, well, this is a pretty serious problem. Ideally, I would roll this back, but I actually have no idea what to roll back because I've released so many things today and yesterday, and I don't know when this problem was caused. So do I roll back everything I released today, or do I pick the one I think might be most likely? Or do I say, this is too complicated, I just got to dive in and try to fix the problem because rolling back isn't guaranteed to work, so I don't know when it was released. So Airbrake is great in that, one, you'll get an alert in real time the first time the error happens, which really helps you narrow that timeline down. So I didn't hear about it till 4 p.m. from the user, but I got an alert at 12:30 that the error had happened. So I know it wasn't any of the things I released since 12:30, and it was probably one of the couple I released right before. In addition to that, you get all sorts of our actual deployment chart will show you which deploy happened immediately preceding the first occurrence of the error, so you can pin it back to that, as well as showing you again which line of code caused the error and other information that helps you pinpoint it back to the actual source of the problem. So now you can, in real time, you find out about the error earlier than you did in waiting for a customer to tell you about it, and you can pinpoint it back to an individual deploy, an individual line of code, and decide, am I going to fix this or roll it back? Right. So, it's different than the waterfall world where if someone tells you at 4 p.m. on the day of release that something's broken, you're pretty damn sure which release it is. But in that case, you've released, so much stuff that that you're unlikely to want to roll the whole thing back unless you have to. So, yeah. So the use cases work out a little bit differently, but at the end result, it's still I have a problem. I need to know how and when the problem was caused, and how do I fix it as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. We have another question from Kimbray. Can you read from existing logs or only via the notifier?
Yeah, so right now, it's a great question. We have talked about whether or not we should try to read through existing logs. Today, it only works through the notifier. The reason for that is a couple-fold. So one, reading through the logs would be very difficult to do in real time. So the core use case of Airbrake is when something happens, we let you know about it right away in real time. If we have to go read through logs, inevitably there's going to be a delay there. It's going to be anywhere from minutes to hours to days, depending on the size and complexity of the logs and the parsing that has to be done. So it sort of undermines at least one core part of the use case, which is we tell you right away. The other issue is that we don't get to determine what gets written to the logs. So we have a lot of feature functionality around things like breadcrumbs that show you, here's all the steps the user took in that session immediately preceding, the user took or that your application took immediately preceding the problem. The error logs may have some of that information, although it wouldn't all be tied back to that error necessarily. You'd have to go through and make some leaps of faith around, well, these are all the messages that appeared in the logs immediately before, so this would potentially imply that the user did this or the app did that. And so we kind of end up, if we start scraping the logs and pulling that information, in a bit of a situation where we can't tell you real time what the problem is, and we can't even necessarily give you all the information you'd want to have on how to reproduce and understand the problem better. So there would be some value in that information, but we felt like there isn't enough to justify building that versus having people use the notifier where we get all the advantages of real time and a robust contextual information on the error.
Great. And then we have a follow-up question from Anders. Could this work on Docker, AWS, and so on, since it's part of the app?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I understand the question right, if your services are running in AWS, this could be certainly deployed into your app in AWS. All of our, like for example, Airbrake runs in AWS, so all of our services, all of our applications all run in AWS, and we obviously have deployed Airbrake to use all of that. And our on-premise version of Airbrake is deployed via Docker. So, yeah.
Excellent. All right, I have one final question here, it looks like, and that would be, how do you handle task management? Do you work with Jira? Yeah,
so that is an excellent question. So, look, we are a team that likes to use external tools because we're not a believer in trying to build everything ourselves. You can usually, if you want to build your own thing, you can often make something that's pretty slick for your very first iteration, although it takes time. But over time, you find that whatever you've built gets outdated and isn't maintained the way it ought to be. And so we personally use things like GitHub and Slack and all sorts of external tools. When we built Airbrake, we made a deliberate decision to leverage high quality tools rather than try to rebuild that functionality ourselves. So we integrate with most large task management products like Pivotal Tracker and Jira, Git repositories like GitHub and Bitbucket, as well as communication tools like Slack and HipChat. I think we have something like 15 or 20 integrations. I can't even keep track anymore. But the idea was we wanted to outsource. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel on tools that the teams already use and love. So for example, in Airbrake, there's not an ability to assign a Airbrake error to a person. The reason being, say you've integrated it with GitHub like we have, and an error is set to create a GitHub ticket automatically and pull in the relevant information and link back to Airbreak, that GitHub ticket gets assigned to a user on your team. If someone goes into Airbreak and assigns that error to a different user, now you get two people that are assigned to the same task. So to us, that is like we're taking something that GitHub, Jira, et cetera, are already good at, which is task management and workflow, and we're trying to insource that. And instead we said, no, you should integrate with those tools and create an issue in GitHub for your Airbreak error and run the full task management through GitHub. And then when you close it, have it close the Airbreak error so it completes the loop, but don't rebuild that whole like assignment process in Airbreak. Right. So that's the long answer. The short answer is we do have integrations with those tools, and specifically we have them because we want Airbreak to work well in your existing workflow rather than trying to force you to use a whole different workflow than what your customers are.
Yep, very good. Okay, now I understand that there's a poll that we want to launch now and get some information from our attendees.
Yeah, I think, look, this was, hopefully this was valuable and educational for everyone, kind of regardless of what stage you're at right now. But I'd love to know if there's people that have other questions or they'd like to learn a little bit more about how Airbreak error monitoring works. I think I mentioned in the presentation that you can go to airbreak.io and you can try it for free. But I'm happy to have any follow-up conversations with people who'd like to learn a little bit more and understand kind of how it works for their business or who have special needs. So if you'd like to learn more, select yes. If you're not interested in hearing a bunch of additional details, because you definitely just want to try it on your own, that's cool too.
Excellent. All right, so Joe, thank you for a really excellent presentation today. We'd also like to thank airbreak.io for sponsoring today's presentation. And I, of course, would like to thank all of our attendees for hanging in there and hopefully finding a lot of value out of the presentation today. So on behalf of all those folks and myself, Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times, so long, everyone. Until next time, take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.